Just a few decades ago, video games were only long because they were so hard.
That's what she said!
Arcade cabinets were eating up quarters, games tested the player's ability to achieve high scores, memorize levels, and enemy spawn patterns. Replaying stages repeatedly when getting ripped in half by enemies padded the game, making the experience last much longer than their actual runtime. These high difficulty games were acceptable at the time, but game design has now evolved beyond cheap difficulty and artificial length.
Wow.
As you look at all these buttons.
Nowadays, game developers brag about how big their game worlds are, the lengthy time for a playthrough, or how much side content there is to explore. Games as a service now exist where potential playtime is meant to be limitless, or until the sequel comes out. Open worlds with sprawling, lifelike environments and enough content to make your head spin, and even overwhelm the player to the point of putting the controller down. Now that us 90s boys and girls are pushing 30, I've come to realize quickly that games are real long, and not just because I'm old. It's because they go beyond the length that they should be at times. 30 hours of content sounds good on paper, but if that content is half great and half doo-doo, then maybe I don't want the extra 15 hours. If you like the games I talk about within this video, there's nothing wrong with that, and in fact, I like them quite a bit too. But they are also bloated with some content that isn't as strong as the majority of the game. A good example to start, I think, is Assassin's Creed Odyssey, which was the first game of the series I've played since Black Flag. I liked the game quite a bit for the first 25 hours or so, but then there are many repeating areas within cities that the player is meant to clear of enemies, which wore on me. The game and narrative is engaging, but by the end, I just couldn't wait for it to be over. I put about 60 hours into it, and I know that people have played a lot more than that in their playthroughs. Enemies scale with you in the game, so I felt like I've gotten better, but so has every other enemy in the entirety of Greece, so it doesn't really matter at all. If everyone is better, then no one is better. And now I'm level 50, and so is little Jimmy, the guard that has stood still in Kefalonia for my entire playthrough, and I feel no progression as a player whatsoever. There's a lot of content in this game, and a lot of it is good, but when the player is not engaged, you start to lose them. Mechanically, there is a lot to explore, but also the enemies take like 900 stabs to die. Why does this game even have Assassin's Creed in the title if you can't assassinate every enemy in the game in one hit unless your power is enough? Compare Assassin's Creed to another open world game like Breath of the Wild. Oops, the other Breath of the Wild. Zelda also has a huge open world with side quests, likable characters, and ways to improve your character. But I put over 60 hours into that game, and I didn't want it to end. I wanted more. So what the hell makes these two experiences that from a high level are very similar make my old dumb mushy brain feel differently about? So what are the biggest complaints about the best games of the last few years? Red Dead's clunky controls, too much horse riding, hyper-realism, Final Fantasy VII Remake's side quests and unnecessary additions to the original story, The Last of Us 2's length, pacing, and over-realism, Ghost of Tsushima's over-reliance on existing open-world tropes. All of these complaints are about content in the game that adds longevity. Take a look at the PS4's completions right now. With even a game like Final Fantasy VII with so much nostalgia for it, only having just over 50% completion. Let's look at it from another angle. The Office is an amazing show that has been rewatched arguably more than any other show of all time. There are consistently great episodes, but it also has some amazing scenes that were cut to better the episode.
I declare bankruptcy!
Video games are known to cut a lot of ideas, but these are typically unfinished or don't work within the game's story or systems. A mission, mechanic, or level being serviceable is sometimes worse being left in the game to pad the length than to just cut it all together. What did Miyamoto say? If you cut all the bad shit, then it's a good game forever. Yeah, that's definitely it. Have you ever picked up a new game and had the feeling that you'd played it already? Well, game development is an industry of taking existing ideas and expanding and improving them. This is not a bad thing. Everyone will be copying The Last of Us Part 2's rope physics, but sometimes games are too similar and it turns me away very quickly. Ghost of Tsushima's side tales completely engaged me, but things like finding flags, hot springs, and shrines started to wear thin. Seeing the same animations repeatedly, climbing walls in the same way that I've climbed them, in the Uncharted series, and the Assassin's Creed series, and the Tomb Raider series, and Horizon Zero Dawn, and God of War. Seriously. Being able to scale walls is important for traversing in open worlds, which is something that Breath of the Wild completely nails, but for these short sections, straight platforming is more interesting to me. Also, Bethesda, let us climb in your damn games. Come on now, it's 2020. So how can game devs avoid these issues? Make things like climbing more mechanically interesting by, I don't know, making them more than just the push of a thumbstick. Remove uninteresting or less fun side content even if it adds length to the game, and iterate on the pace of levels. Finding the flags in Tsushima is not rewarding or engaging enough to me to hold my attention when I can be doing something much more fun elsewhere in the game or in another game entirely. This is similar to Final Fantasy VII Remake side missions, whose objectives are hard to find and are uninteresting from a narrative perspective. Lastly is realism. While looking undeniably gorgeous in Red Dead 2 and The Last of Us 2, slowing the pacing down to skin an animal or opening a drawer or cabinet every single time is draining on the experience, and something a lot quicker would help pacing in these games. As much as I enjoy open world games and huge RPGs, as of right now I don't feel any desire to return to ones that I've completed already. I feel I have seen what I need to see while playing the main story, and playing them again will require too much of my time when new games are constantly coming out. If the Red Dead story is really as good as people say, why have only 28% of players completed the game on PS4? There were numerous times when Final Fantasy VII Remake story and gameplay escalated to a high, and I thought I was nearing the end, but then the game went on for another 10 hours. The characters in the game even say, "This is the point of no return," 3 times by the end of the game. I understand the choice, but it just feels so inconsistent to constantly be ready for a final showdown, only to be dropped into falling action again and again. So with all that being said, games too often fail to leave us wanting more. Upon playing Titanfall 2, one of the best FPS games that God has blessed us with this decade, it left me wishing the game wouldn't end, by treating its levels in a very similar way to Mario games, by introducing interesting and fun mechanics, implementing them throughout a level in different ways, and moving on, making it a tightly focused campaign that is still under 10 hours. Breath of the Wild, while containing a huge, expansive world, with complete freedom, still left us all wondering, what if they brought classic Zelda dungeons into this style of game? What if classic items and weapons made a return? What if you could mix all of the mechanics from Breath of the Wild and the previous games from the series all into one game? All of the content in the game is not perfect, but the world has so much to see, it's hard to put the controller down. Some of the best games of all time are short. There, I said it. The best games are not padded with content to add length for a back-of-the-box checkmark, but are intentionally crafted with the experience in mind, optimizing the game to be played and enjoyed, rather than leaving the player exhausted by it. Which games did you feel were the perfect length? Which ones did you feel were far too long? Let me know in the comments, and thanks for watching.
What?